This is the custom fitters review of the Titleist TS2 and TS3 driver. With all the different settings, movable weights and Hosels, this is a complex driver and it's a fitting dream, to be honest, but it can be a bit of a golfer's nightmare. But don't worry, myself and Dave have broken it down. We've got which head suits what type of golfer. We've also got great insights into the Hosel, and we've simplified it so you can get the best from this driver. There's one thing that we both agree on though: when you put this down behind the ball, it's one beautiful looking driver. So what we've seen from our fittings here, it's fair to say this driver has been a better player product. It's gravitated towards the lower handicapper, the slightly better ball striker, if that makes sense. This isn't really a high handicap golf improver type product. This is more of a performance style product, but with the two different heads, it kind of covers off the two different styles of driver. The TS2 head, which has the fixed weight at the back, is kind of more of the forgiving product, if that's the right word. So higher MOI, a slightly wider footprint, and it's designed, I guess, for the driver off the tee, or the guy off the tee who is a fairly decent ball striker, but it might be the weakest part of his game. I've been applying this to players who want a little bit more forgiveness from the club, and then I've been just adjusting the Hosel to suit the type of player, and then obviously it's got a kind of a shaft specific built around the speed story. The TS3 head, the other head, where have you been placing that one?
So unlike TS2 with a fixed weight, you have an adjustable back weight. So it tends to be, it's obviously a slightly smaller footprint, slightly lower launch than the TS2. So you've got those two characteristics, but it tends to be the player with a specific miss. So with the draw setting and the fade setting, you can make something anti-left or anti-right. So it tends to be the guy with a specific miss who's looking to maybe change that flight or help themselves out. Again, like in both drivers, it tends to be just about hitting fairways consistently. Gotcha.
The TS2 head then, from a shafts, I've been using I have a couple of higher weights, but I've been using a lot more lighter weights. So there's 4 really good, solid stock shaft options from Titleist this year for this driver, and I've been using that Tensei, the lightweight 55 gram, and then there's also a Kurakage in 50 gram. Tends to be better with the sort of more higher MOI, the more forgiving product, because you're trying to get more speed out of it, a little bit more height and a little bit more flight in it.
Certainly.
Whereas the other 2 shafts are
you have a even flow white, and you also have a smoke Project X hazardous. Again, they tend to work better in the smaller heads. The standard length profile's gone up by ½ an inch, so you tend to, in TS3, bring the length back to your traditional Titleist standard length, heavier weight, better balance, bit more neutrality, because this drive is more about, as much as there's a speed story, you have enough speed story in the head, so you're still looking for the same control out of the shaft.
In terms of speed, but in terms of speed, that is quicker than last year's 917. There's no doubt about that.
Absolutely.
They've done a really good job with it. When you're changing the shaft, also the weights in the back of the TS2, there's heavier and lighter ones available, so you can customize the weight. The Hosel settings, what have you been using the most of in terms of the Hosel settings?
So it's incredibly complicated. It's letters and numbers. There's no real specific plus and minus and open and closed. So we have always maybe not had a problem with this, but it's the only one system that I can never remember.
You can trust me, if we're having a problem with this, I'd suspect that you guys probably are too. So I think what we'll do is we have a reconfigured setting graph that we kind of use internally here. I think I'm going to share that with you. I'll put it in the description below. You can take a look at it, and it could make it a little bit easier for you to understand. But the popular settings here, I guess, are going to be more open sets.
Well, you have open lower loft, and then you have closed higher loft, because Titleist drivers naturally sit open anyway. So you only really have open and closed, and then you have 2 positives, a standard and 1 negative loft setting. So I tend to think of this driver from a settings perspective in pick your loft, pick your weight, and then the rest of the stuff is just more, again, the visual right for the client.
And obviously tying it into the whole TrackMan numbers, getting this thing dialed in right based on loft and the way that the Hosel is set up. The weights then as well, as I said, on TS2 it's a fixed weight, which can be changed, but it's purely from a fitting/building perspective. But in TS3, there's a movable weight. This chamber at the back of the driver opens up, and then you can slide weights in and out. Explain quickly how you would give the quick fit guide to that.
So previously in last year's model, you got two physical separate weights. One was a draw fade weight with one weighted heavy at one end and one weighted the other and one neutral weight. So this is a little bit more clever this year. They use a little bit of a magnet, so you can have the draw biased or the fade biased or the neutral setting out of one physical torpedo. So literally a case of the maximum weight in the heel makes it draw, maximum weight in the toe makes it fade, and then the neutral setting, which is the cap on both ends, gives you the even setting.
It's perfect. It's fair to say the R&D team at Titleist done a phenomenal job with this. They've sat down and they've really configured the head, the shape, the face, the way the driver sounds. Everything has been well designed. Let's take a closer look at the tech now. Even though there are two heads from the new TS Titleist range, both are 460 cc's. The TS3 is the slightly smaller footprint one with the deeper face, narrower body. And the TS2 then is the wider bodied, slightly narrower face, but wider and bigger footprint. The reason being is the weighting system on the TS3 is positioned in order to get the maximum from that head, and then the TS2 has that fixed weight but brings in this higher MOI or a slightly more forgiving story. The speed chassis is where Titleist are putting all their energy into this year. What they've done basically is they've stripped weight out of both the crown, the sole, and even the face. And this is to tie in with this whole higher launching, lower spinning model that the drivers of today are following. And the face is actually so thin they can't even put lines in it. They've got to laser etch them on there. This driver is definitely faster than previous models. We've tested it and we've seen that, but the speed story is also combined with a much higher launching, lower spinning product, which is where the distances are definitely coming from. And don't remember the Hosel as well. It's 16 different settings on this, so be very careful when you're trying to align this. We've put a little helpful guide below. Left-handers out there, remember it's reverse, so it's back ways. And also if you are looking at shafts for this driver and you are that better player, if you're accessing more performance shafts or grips, there are upcharges for those, so be careful as the cost will mount up. I hope you've enjoyed that video. We've got some other videos about drivers on the channel, so make sure that you subscribe and I'll catch you at the next video. But on the TS3 head,